What is wrong with you? Like, if this is the only legal argument that they can put forward, they're in some serious trouble here, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, there may be some more bad news coming to the Liberals. Remember that little old riding in Quebec called Terrebonne?
I do.
Remember that after it was adjudicated by judicial review, they found there was only one vote. And remember how the Bloc didn't particularly like that, especially because someone actually came forward with a return mail, a return letter that actually was returned to them because Elections Canada put the wrong returning address on the ballot. So her vote didn't count, and she said, I was going to vote Bloc. Yeah, that. So this past week, arguments were presented for 3 days in a superior court in Quebec about why the results should be overturned and they should have a by-election. That's what happened this week. Did you hear anything about it?
No.
I sure didn't. Because they were too busy ripping on Pierre, and then Trump just took over the whole narrative. So a really, really important story got completely subverted because they didn't like about what Pierre said about the RCMP. So this is your update. Now, I'm going to be showing you the few articles that I did find on this. We are going to be reading them, but there's really, really important stuff in there. The first article we're going to talk about goes through the argument made by the Bloc on why it should be overturned. and then I'll tell you what you're going to talk about next. So, let's take a look. Lawyer for Bloc candidate who lost by one ballot urges court to annul the vote. Okay, so this is you can see in the middle. It's Natalie Sinclair Degagné. She is the MP in question who lost the election in her riding on April 28th, and you can see E. Blanchette on the right, and then.
I think that's Normandin.
Yes, that's Madame Normandin on the left, who is actually in proc, who I had the pleasure of questioning me.
The lawyer for a former Bloc Quebecois MP who lost her riding by a single vote in the April federal election says allowing the result to stand would send a, quote, disastrous message, end quote, to voters. A 3-day hearing began Monday in Saint-Jérôme, Quebec, where Natalie Sinclair Degagné is challenging the outcome of the April 28th election in the riding of Terrebonne, north of Montreal. The Bloc incumbent lost the riding by one vote to Tatiana Auguste, now a Liberal MP. The legal action comes after a local woman, Emmanuelle Bassé, revealed that her special ballot was returned to her after the election because of an error in the address on the envelope provided by Elections Canada. She said she would have voted for the Bloc candidate, meaning the result would have been tied had her vote been counted. Sinclair Degagné's lawyer, Stephanie Chatingy, argued Monday in the Superior Court that Bassé's charter rights were violated because her ballot wasn't counted. He says a new election must be ordered in the riding. Chatigny said that upholding the election result would, quote, send a disastrous message to voters that even Elections Canada can make mistakes, but that there will be no consequences despite the decisive impact on the outcome of the election, end quote. By refusing to cancel the election, the court would send the message that some votes count more than others, end quote, he said. Such an outcome would permanently undermine the public confidence, end quote. Sworn statements filed in the case show that an election employee discovered he had mistakenly printed his own postal code on several special ballots about 3 weeks before the election day. He estimated that a minimum of 40 envelopes had gone out with the wrong postal code.
Okay. So, that's what happened. Now, are you ready for the most infuriating thing?
Yes.
Here we go. Well, no, this isn't the most infuriating thing. Yeah, it's probably the most infuriating thing. The funniest thing is later. This is the most infuriating.
The employee said he didn't deem it necessary to inform the returning officer because they were routinely receiving returned ballots despite the error. His previous experience in the role suggested to him that the rate of return was on par with previous elections. Chatengi said the error constitutes an irregularity that compromised the vote. He said other voters may have also been affected because 16 other special ballots were not returned by the deadline. During the hearing on Monday, Justice Eric Dufour asked several questions about whether the error truly undermined the integrity of the vote, referring to a 2012 Supreme Court of Canada decision that set a high bar for annulling elections based on administrative errors. Chatengi said the error was a, quote, a serious mistake, end quote, that affected the outcome of the election.
So this employee who screwed up large said, oh, well, this kind of thing happens, so you shouldn't worry about it.
It's fine. They'll still get it to back to us, no problem. And you know, I have mailed things with the wrong postal code before, and sometimes they end up where they're supposed to, and sometimes they don't. It's not really a risk you should be taking with something as important as a vote.
Right. And you shouldn't be sitting there thinking, well, you know, the election will probably be, you know, decided by more than 40 votes. So who cares? These 40 people, their vote doesn't matter.
Right.
You don't get to make that decision,
No.
Mr. Election Worker.
No.
So no doubt this was just him panicking and saying, well, I got to say something so I don't get fired and I don't get thrown in jail and I don't get any of these other consequences. But come on, man. That's unreal.
Yeah.
It's unreal. Now, the court case that they're talking about, that they're saying sets a really high bar, it applies, but it doesn't really apply. So there was this other case that they're talking about, and the issue there was that there was a bunch of extra votes, and it wasn't, I shouldn't say extra votes, it was a bunch of votes that they probably shouldn't have necessarily counted, but they did, right? They did.
Do we know for what reason?
I forget. It doesn't matter. The point is what the court said is the court will err on the side of ensuring that votes do count versus votes that do not. Now, the other case or the other scenario to consider is taking those other votes away wouldn't necessarily have affected the outcome of that election. So even if they did take them all away, the results still would have stood.
But this is a one vote difference.
Well, but this is also the reverse too, because in this case, it's not that they had too many votes; it's that they had too few that were counted. They had at least 5 of these mail-in ballots that people have put up their hand and verified, yeah, I got this back because it had the wrong address on. So if the court actually upholds that previous case of we're going to err on the side of making sure that Canadians are able to vote, then they're going to actually err on the side of, well, these votes should have counted. And these votes should have actually, it would have overturned the result of the election.
Do we know if they were all block votes?
So we don't, and they're not going to ask that because it's irrelevant, right?
It's just the fact that these votes exist that should have been counted and were not, and therefore we need to redo the election as a by-election.
And 5 is greater than 1. So the point is it's who voted for who shouldn't and can't be asked because that's a breach of privacy.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And you're not supposed to be able to do that. But the court just has to assume, okay, all 5 of those votes, let's say they were block, then it would have overturned the election. If 2 of them were block, it would have overturned the election. So that's what the court has to decide here. So I think if the judge applies the law appropriately, then it's actually going to match that precedent that they are setting in that other case. But the Liberals are trying to use this to say, oh well, they didn't annul that election, so they won't annul this one. No, you have to look at the legal argument as to why. But the Liberals don't want to do that because they want to keep their seat. This is the other side. Unreasonable to cancel election won by single vote, lawyer for Liberal MP says. Imagine having to argue this case.
The lawyer for Quebec Liberal MP who won her riding in the April federal election by a single vote argued on Tuesday it would be unfair to other voters to cancel the result over one uncounted ballot. Marc-Étienne Vienne, lawyer for MP Tatiana Auguste, told a hearing in Saint Jerome, Quebec, that ordering a new election would be quote-unquote unreasonable and would effectively disenfranchise the tens of thousands of people who cast ballots in the Terrebonne riding north of Montreal. Quote, to cancel the election is to deny the right to vote that was expressed by these 61,115 people, end quote, Vienne said in Superior Court. If a new vote were held, he said, some of the people who cast ballots in April may have since died or would be otherwise unable to vote in a new by-election. Wow, that's quite the argument. Is this the funny part you were talking about? Okay.
This is not surprising coming from the Liberal lawyer, but holy cow.
So if you've since died, like since April, then you don't really care now, do you? You don't care who's the MP because you don't have the capacity to care.
By that argument, we shouldn't have another election again because people die between elections. What is wrong with you? Like, if this is the only legal argument that they can put forward, they're in some serious trouble here, folks. Like, how about people... There may be people that couldn't vote in the last election because they were physically unable to, but then they got better, and now they can actually vote. How about that argument? How about there's some people that are now the age of 18 and can now vote in the election that weren't 18 at that? Like,
or what if
come
people
on.
move to a different country? Like, you can't argue based on what ifs.
Like, oh, people may have died since the last election, so that wouldn't be fair.
People may have been born since the last election.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Liberal logic 101.
Brutal.
It's insane. But, there is some more.
Sworn statements filed in the case show that an election employee discovered he had mistakenly printed his own postal code on several special ballots about 3 weeks before the election day. Vienne told the court that there are well-known risks to voting by mail and that by law, it's not Elections Canada's responsibility to ensure mail-in ballots arrive at polling stations. Vienne described the error as banal and said human error can happen to anyone and results in a few votes not being counted for a variety of reasons. Quote, these are things that happened, he said. To allow contestation of elections on this basis doesn't seem appropriate, end quote. He also said it's not a given that the ballot in question affected the outcome of the election. He said 3 ballots marked for the Bloc Quebecois were found in garbage cans at the polling station and that they were included in the final vote tally despite not being placed in the ballot box by the voter. He suggested those votes could be discounted because their authenticity could not be confirmed, meaning Auguste's margin of victory should have been 4 votes and not 1. Okay, so here's the deal with that last paragraph. Whatever the judge's ruling is at the judicial recount, that is considered final. So if the judge decides that, yeah, we'll take those votes that were in the garbage can, then that's what stands.
Yep. The judge didn't rule on these mail-in ballots because
they were unknown.
Were not known. Right.
Yeah.
And like you can't start bringing in these hypotheticals like that. What the judge in this case has to look at is, okay, what is the irregularity that I'm supposed to be reviewing? Because that's basically the only way you can overturn an election result, is if there's actual irregularity and it contributed to the election result. So you can't bring up, well, there's votes in votes in garbage cans that were counted. Sorry, irrelevant.
Well, it's already been dealt with. It's
Right.
already been ruled on by a judge. That's what a judicial recount is.
So, what the judge has to look at is how many votes were found in this case that you're talking about in these mail-in ballot. Okay, so we have a case where 40 were sent out with the wrong return address. So that's a problem number one. And they found 16 weren't sent back, something like that. And 5 of them were actually verified by people putting up their hand and saying, I have it right here. And one of them was willing to come out and say, I was going to vote for the block. Now, it doesn't matter that she said I was going to vote for the block, but you have those 5 people there. So the judge has to say, okay, this was a case of, it's not like crap happened. It's not like the people mailed their ballots in late, which they may try and ask. But the judge is going to assume that the people voting exercised their vote correctly, unless it can be proved that they didn't. The judge usually sides with the voter on this. So they're going to assume that the voters filled out their ballot, put it in the envelope, and mailed it properly. And properly meaning with the return address that they were given to them by Elections Canada. That is now the irregularity introduced into the election. And because 5 is greater than 1, unless you're a liberal, then it absolutely satisfies the second condition where it affected the outcome of the election. So it's like that was said in the article. There is like a 0.0000000016% margin of victory here, which means, and I love this argument that the Bloc lawyer put forward, that is actually the confidence level that this election was won by. So I think that's a really, really good argument. So now, after these 3 days, the Superior Court judge is going to take this away, and they're going to return a verdict back relatively quickly in court terms, which I've looked up. It's probably going to be 6 to 8 weeks, and then we will get an idea as to what's going to happen. And the irony here is they could come back and say, yes, there needs to be a by-election, and then Mark Carney could wait 6 months or 3 months, and then we go back to a general election to actually decide it.
In this case, though, is it up to Mark Carney? Like, would that seat just sit vacant and then he would decide when the by-election is? Or would the Superior Court come in and say, no, that seat is vacant and you need to do a by-election right quick?
Here's what could happen. If the Liberals wanted to be real annoying people, trying to keep it parliamentary, they could immediately appeal that, which would be, it wouldn't look very good, appealing a one vote result. But they could.
Can you appeal the Supreme? Oh no, it's the Superior Court. Oh, then it would go to the Supreme Court.
Then it would go to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So they could appeal that, and then it would go to the Supreme Court, and usually in that case it would be stayed, which means the Liberal MP gets to keep getting paid while this is decided.
Yeah. Well, and that's the issue, is you have somebody who should not be in that seat.
So, but by the time this is even decided, we could be into a new general election.